Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Kindred Skulls podcast. My name is Greg Blake. I am one of the co-hosts of the show and joined this evening with Matt Freese. Hello, Matt.
How we doing, Greg?
I'm doing all right, man. How are you?
Not too bad. First episode with a new name. We lost one of our third member tonight. Nick's busy this week, so yes. Unfortunately he's not going to be able to make it with us, but he'll be back. And
we're rebranding, and Nick is no longer in the equation. Just tonight, though. Just for tonight. Yeah. Two big haymakers right out of the gate for our listeners who are tuning in specifically to listen to Nick and to listen to the Heart and Skull podcast, which is no longer our name. So real quick on the name rebrand, ran into a little bit of rights snafu with the old name. So now we're Kindred Skulls, and we've got all our rights squared away. We won't have any issues with that. Links pretty much stayed the same. We made the name change over. The Twitter handle, if you were following the Twitter, we just changed the handle. So it's the same Twitter account. We still have the same followers. The links for iTunes and Spotify, I think, stayed the same if you're finding them on your web browser. Yeah, they are. I even logged into my podcast app today just to kind of check, and everything swapped out. Yeah. So if you're already listening to us, you're still listening to us, just with a new moniker and without Nick today.
And if you're a new listener, welcome.
Welcome aboard. Matt, we lost a football game. We lost a real big football game. The first quarter of the season is in the books, and we'll talk a little bit about that. When we started the season, we talked about the possibility that we'd have a tough start to the year. I mean, we discussed that on this very pod. I think many people knew it was going to be a tough start to the year. Now we're 1-3. We had a brutal loss to the Browns this week. The high feelings of the Seahawks game are all but erased. How are you feeling, first of all, emotionally?
After this emotionally, game? It's disappointing in general, right? And I feel pretty much how I did after the first 2 weeks at this point. It's tough because I think the way the team is trending and the way we've played so far is going to lead to kind of major changes over the offseason at this point. I kind of was feeling that way after the first 2 weeks. The team just wasn't able to get it done in pivotal moments.
Matt, you are jumping. I was going to wait until like week 8 to start introducing these storylines.
That's kind of the disappointment and that's why I kind of feel disappointed, because I think this team has a significant amount of talent, and I kind of like the coaching staff and the regime. I don't think they're perfect by any means, but it's a little bit, it's just been frustrating the whole season. And there's a lot of nuance that I think goes into it. Like, when I've been thinking about this, my brain has been doing, if you remember the meme with Nathan Fillion, I think it is, from Castle, where he's like, like he doesn't know quite what to say. It's hard to describe because I think this is probably an average team that's ended up 1-3. We've lost to a couple of really good teams, I think, in the Cardinals and the Browns, and we beat a really good team, I think, in the Seahawks. Right. The Bengals, they are 3-1. I'm not that high on them as a team, but even if you look at our losses, we could just as easily be 3-1 as we are 1-3. So while we are on the losing end, of a couple of very close games, I don't think the team is terrible, but it's hard to, I think, with the stagnation that we've seen from year to year, it's hard to be able to say this is a regime I want to move forward with. And I mean, it might be early to say that right now. And I don't think there's still a lot of season left for it to be able to turn around. But like, that's kind of where I think a lot of the fan base is at this point too.
Yeah, I haven't really been engaging with, the subreddit or with Vikings Twitter as much this year. Partially because I find myself fairly detached from the team at the moment. I'm going to be honest with you. And it's weird that we started a podcast about the team in the very year that I would describe. This is about as disappointed as I've been in the squad since I can remember, since maybe I don't even know, tail end of Peterson's career, maybe, where it was we were in kind of right before Simmer came along. And it does feel like a crossroads season. It's felt like a crossroads season from the start. And even though I said here multiple times, I can live with 3 losses, maybe even 4 to start the year. Like I said that, and I think I meant it, but it's a lot different living it than imagining it. And
it always is. It is every single time. You get yourself every single time. It's the classic Vikings trope. They give you hope, and then they dash your hopes. But I mean, we know the history of this team, right? I don't think this is the end for the Vikings this season. I don't think that, being 1-3 means they're eliminated from playoff contention. I think that really, if you look at the Vikings history, they're going to do enough to make the playoffs or come very close to making the playoffs. And then they're going to crush us again. Right. So I just can't wait for that part.
And I'm at the point, and you brought it up. We didn't even talk about this. I actually thought about this afternoon. I was like, do we even go here? And we're going here. So I think even if we make the playoffs, I'm having a hard time imagining a version of this that I'm in love with. And then I'm just like, man, I can't wait for next year or whatever. I feel like I just kind of want something new. And it's a weird thing to process. It's disappointing.
Yeah. So I think the key there is the model of the team that we're supposed to be really is the team that we played this past week in the Cleveland Browns. And I don't think the Cleveland Browns played great. Like, if we want to jump into that game real quick here.
Yeah, let's get into it. We lost. There's a number of reasons that we lost. The game started a little funky. We had these really, really long drives for each team. There were 3 really big ones to start the game off. That was a little weird. We'd chewed through a quarter and a half before you knew it. The Vikings had a really, really bad end of the half sequence to leave a nice dirty taste in your mouth, right? A sour taste in your mouth right as you're going into the half. The Browns tried to give us this game multiple times, and we refused the offer multiple times. And then we just kind of lost, and we just got beat. And we'll get it. I know you have a lot of detail to go into about why we lost. The first question I want to ask you, and this is talking a little bit about the philosophy of the team, and maybe we're getting a little tired of things and everything we just spoke about. One of the things that I'm realizing is I might be changing a little bit about what I enjoy in football and what I enjoy in the game. And that's been really hard for me. And I'm a traditionalist, this. I love the run. I love defense. These are things that I have always enjoyed. But I don't know. Do we like long clock eating drives anymore? Is this a good thing to have?
So I was thinking about this a little bit.
Or rather, is this a good thing to build your team around? It would be a better way to put it, I think.
So I think with the way the NFL is now, actually it is it's an okay way to build your team. I think it's the way you build your team when you don't have one of the top echelon quarterbacks. Which I like Kirk Cousins quite a bit. I mean, I know I'm a lot higher on him than you are, but ultimately, Kirk isn't going to be a Mahomes or a Herbert where he's going to carry the team on his back. The Vikings offense, I think, is actually built in a good way to meet with Kirk's strengths. And really, the first half of this game kind of felt a little bit like the Packers game last year, that second Packers game last year, where, I think that first half was 4 drives in that game. This was somewhat similar to that.
I might have been very drunk at that point in the season. So
Yes.
I can't say
this is somewhere similar to that, where, the offense is, to use the old term, we're just matriculating down the field, right? There weren't a whole lot of explosives. If you look at the Cleveland drive, it's 4-yard gain, 4-yard. It's literally if you gain 4 yards on every single play, you get a first down.
Matriculating is one of those words. I can't remember the name of this phenomenon where you hear a word or you see a vehicle on the road or something that you feel like you've never seen before, and then all of a sudden you see it everywhere.
Okay, yeah.
I think matriculating is one of these words for me this year. I feel like I've heard it in broadcasts. I was like, did everybody get together and decide this is a word we're using in football this year? I like it though. It's a good word for it.
It's one of the classic quotes, right? I mean, I think that was against us, Hank Stram, right? The Chiefs in the Super Bowl IV or whatever. Yeah,
sure.
So, but ultimately, like, if you look at this game, I think the point blank point is that our offensive line was not good enough to compete in this game, and the Cleveland offensive line was good enough to win the game. And the Cleveland defensive line was good enough to dominate our offensive line. I think that's the number one thing. The Vikings missed a couple opportunities, but really they were helped out a little bit by Baker Mayfield playing absolutely horribly, I thought. I mean, just inaccuracy all over the place.
He
really did not have a good game. I thought the defense played rather well. I mean, I talked about, like, it really did seem like every run went for like 2 to 5 yards. And really, there wasn't much outside of that. There were a couple explosive runs, right? But
yeah, neither back of theirs made the century mark. You know, they were in the 60 to 80 yard range, I think.
Yeah. Well, they ended up running in the game 38 times for 180 something yards, which when you look at 180 something yards, that's a lot. And then you divide it by 38 or almost 40, you're still at less than 5 yards per carry. And I actually did a little bit more math looking at this. They really only had, I think it was 5 or 6 runs that were over 6 yards total. Like, the vast majority of their runs were 6 yards or less, and they were short runs. If you look at the run defense and all, this is a little primer. Like, I thought our defensive line played pretty well, and they covered it pretty well. The problem that they had was that big run that allowed 3 points before the first half, right? Like, that was one of the big issues. So, you know, on that end, I thought the defense was pretty good. Coverage was generally pretty good. I did think Baker missed some open shots, so maybe if he hits those, we have a different feeling about coverage in the game.
Oh, we could have lost this game, but that's why I'm hesitant to praise the defense, because I also have to keep in the back of my mind that we could have easily lost this by multiple touchdowns. There was 2 deep passes to OBJ that Baker missed by a mile. He wasn't even close.
Yeah.
And then there was a couple of other plays I'm forgetting at the moment. I had a running list of shit. I was like, oh man, they're trying to give this thing to us. They kept failing to capitalize. They could have definitely scored more points. So even the good feelings that you can have about, you know, oh, we kept the score low. It's like, we did, but
I will be honest. So on that scale, I think really it's only a couple of drives that it was a difference on. I think a couple of the plays were on the same drive that Baker just missed wildly. So if you look at it, the Vikings defense really, outside of the 2 long drives, one that ended in a 4th down stop and the other ended in the touchdown, they allowed the quick drive at the end of the second half and the field goal. And other than that, it's like 5-6 play drives, and all of them pretty much ended in punts. I thought the defense, you know, maybe allowed a couple first downs here and there, but they solidified pretty quickly, and they were keeping everything in front of them. They were limiting explosive runs. They really were. And I thought it was a good job, especially against the Cleveland offense, because so I did the math on this. Cleveland is averaging 2.5 points per drive, which is pretty high after their 4 games. And that includes this game against the Vikings. In this game against the Vikings, they averaged 1.25 points per drive. So if you take that game away, Cleveland's up by around 3 points per drive as one of the top 4 offenses in the NFL. So they are a really talented offense, and we did a great job given the number of drives, because we had 3 and outs all the time too, right? We were punting the ball all the time too. I think we did an admirable job stopping them, even with a couple of misses that Baker had. But still, overall, given the lack of offensive performance, I guess you like to see more from defense.
I'd be curious to see what that number would be if those 2 bombs to OBJ had been completed, though. I bet you they go right back to 2.5 per drive. But
well, to be honest with you, I think maybe one's a touchdown, but the other one, that's just the end of the game. At that point, they're just able to run the clock out.
Yeah,
so that's the thing. It's like that. I don't think that adds any.
All right.
To the drive.
So we'll let the defense off the hook for this week. Let's focus once again. It's because recurring segments. We have to talk about the offensive line. And look, we all know they suck. I mean, like you're not going to hear anything here that you haven't heard, or maybe you will. Maybe Matt has a talent for that. But we knew these kinds of games might happen. And sure enough, when we go up against an elite level pass rush, we blow it. And we've been blowing it for years. And it is really tiring to watch because I said this to you, I think, earlier in the week. We have built a team around a quarterback who is, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, I really don't. He's a dinosaur. He's in the way, it's a pejorative term, but it's relevant. I mean, he's a guy who comes from a different style of playing football. It's not in vogue anymore. We built this team around a guy who it's just, I was amazed, and I was showering him with praise a couple of weeks ago because he managed to roll out and make a throw on the run. And it was like, whoa, holy shit, Kirk Cousins did it. And I thought maybe that's something he had unlocked this year, and he was going to, unfortunately, we have one of these weeks. So
real quick here, Greg, to Kirk Cousins' defense in this game a little bit. And I don't think he played great. I think there were a couple of missed opportunities that he left off the field.
Oh, wait, I want to finish the thought because I'm not trying to bag on Kirk, and I do want you to be able to get that out. But I want to finish the thought, just say, we built this team around this guy, and then we've not built it properly. So that's why games like this happen. We should have been going out and getting big, giant, wide-ass dudes like Oli Udoh at every single position on the line and make sure they can pass block first and then run block. That should have been our focus 5 damn years ago. And we made a huge mistake with how we built this offensive line. A huge mistake. We built it more for a guy who, on a dime, can run out of the pocket, make quick decisions, and do. We built it for a completely different player.
So ultimately, unfortunately, I don't think we really built the offensive line for Kirk Cousins. I think we built the offensive line for the run game that we were run. Outside zone requires the athletic offensive lineman. I really think that was the main driver in terms of like what the body types you see on the Vikings are right now. But back to this game a little bit. We had praised the offensive line quite a bit, the previous couple of weeks. And I think they've been playing some of their best football the last couple of weeks. This past week was one of the worst games from the offensive line in Mike Zimmer era, period, in terms of pressure rate. We were well over 50% pressure rate. I think we were close to 60% pressure rate, which is like just unbelievably bad. Like the offense, and obviously we only scored 7 points. The offense cannot function under that pressure rate. That was the pressure rate Patrick Mahomes was getting in the Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes can't function under the pressure rate that we had this week. So ultimately, I think you can start with the problem with the game was on the offensive line, and you can stop right there. Rashad Hill was an absolute disaster against Myles Garrett. Now, maybe that's not entirely fair to Rashad Hill, who should be a backup swing tackle and is going up against the only bigger athletic freak in the NFL than Danielle Hunter, right?
He doesn't belong.
Myles Garrett is absolutely a monster. Jadeveon Clowney, really good. Oli Udoh had a lot of problems with people crossing his face. Oli Udoh was problematic. Ezra Cleveland was problematic. I thought both Bradbury and O'Neal were okay. Like there were no real major errors from either of those two. And, there was a pressure here and there, but Udoh allowed like 8 pressures or something like that. I don't even want to know what the number for Hill was. Cleveland was
Rashad Hill's game and maybe his whole season can be summed up in that play at the end of the game where Myles Garrett just obliterated him.
He put Hill on his back like 5 times throughout the
my gosh.
It's just
he was getting
my goodness
destroyed.
So I mean, that's ultimately what lost us the game. The offense wasn't able to function. We couldn't get the run game going. And we did try some stuff to counter that. We tried a bunch of screens. We tried a bunch of quick games. quick game stuff, nobody was breaking tackles. I mean, there were 5 or 6 plays where we had guys out in space in the flat. There was a single Browns defender on them, and they weren't able to break the tackle. Conklin did it once. Madison did it at least once. Cook did it once. The Jefferson screen was problematic. Like, we tried stuff to mitigate this pass rush, and it didn't work flat out. The only thing that really seemed to be working was the deep shots down the sideline from Kirk, or deep shots really in the game. There wasn't really a whole lot of intermediate stuff that was available either.
Yeah. And I mean, it stinks that, it's going to be lost to history, but JJ his first half especially he was on fire. I thought he was going to catch 200 yards this game.
No, I think Jefferson's been great. He had another like 30-yard catch that got called back for the Conklin holding, where Conklin ended up one-on-one on Myles Garrett. And I want to address that real quick. I don't think the Vikings in the protection call actually wanted Conklin to be one-on-one with Myles Garrett, but what happened on that side is the way they were blocking it. Hill, there was a simulated pressure, so there was a player who was on the line of scrimmage who Hill was designed to block, who dropped back. And then they blitzed a linebacker from the second level. And if you watch it, Madison's coming over and he's looking right at Garrett. And then you notice is the linebacker blitzing, which was Owusu Koramoah, who's also awesome in this game, come up, and he has to take him because he's a free runner at the quarterback. So it ended up with Conklin one-on-one. It was a good design by the Browns to exploit the Vikings protection to get that to happen, right? So it is a little bit on the Vikings for the way they called it, but
you're saying without saying we got out-coached.
I'm not going to lie. I really kind of think the Vikings got out-coached. If you look at the Browns' 2 extended drives, and this does not happen to the Vikings on defense typically, like the way they were extending those drives was converting on 3rd and 8. Like there were a few conversions that converted on 3rd and long, which is not something that typically happens for the Vikings. And they did, to their credit, adjust and shut it down in the second half. But there were tight end screens that were working, and screens typically like never work at all against the Vikings. There were tight end screens, running back screens, that sort of stuff that was working. And Stefanski, we talked about it last week, has a great screen game. So it's not shocking that he was able to put that together, but it's just how it was. And, on the Clint Kubiak side, I don't think he did an awful job play calling either. But it just wasn't executed by the offense either. So it was an execution problem and a somewhat of a scheme problem.
My impression of Clint's offense at this point is it's much like Kirk Cousins. It's one of those things where if everything's clicking, you're ahead of the defense. You're going to be getting gainers every down, 5, 6, 20, 30. It's sort of it piles up and it builds. And then by the third quarter, you don't know what the hell's happening because guys are going everywhere and they've done everything to you. And unfortunately, much like our quarterback, when things aren't going well, it seems like Clint has a tough time figuring out a simple solution to get the ball moving.
So do we want to jump here real quick to the next segment here? Because I've got a point on this. Yeah,
let's dig right into it. So it's time for Take Talk, which is one of my favorite parts of the show, where Matt unleashes his doctorate of football knowledge upon us. So Matt, talk to me, and Nick, but Nick's not here tonight, so he doesn't get the compliment.
Yes.
Okay, talk to me. What do you want to get into first?
Okay, so what we'll jump into is what we were just talking about, where Clint Kubiak's offense, against this defensive front. So the Browns were running a lot of, and we've talked about this on a couple previous podcasts, the heavy fronts, specifically the 6-1 front. And this is something that actually there's a very good resource.
So just for the listeners, this will be the 4th time that you have noticed this defense being run.
It's the 3rd time. The Cardinals.
Third time.
That's so right. So it's what helped the Bengals shut down our running game. I thought, and we talked about this last week, I thought the team made good adjustments against the Seahawks. And then this week, the Browns came in and ran this again. If you guys want to learn more about this front, there's a really good video that just came out last night. Coach Vass on Twitter. He runs the Make Defense Great Again podcast. He's an awesome resource for this sort of stuff, but he did a live stream on this game where he went over the tape on this game and was showing what the Browns were doing on defense and explaining why it works. So the main thing that this shuts down is the wide zone run game.
And you can also check out Freeze Football Fridays, which will be released on our YouTube channel. Is that what we're calling it?
Yeah, Fries Football Fridays. Yeah,
Fries Football. Sorry, I did it again. Oh my God!
No,
We talked about this.
You pronounced my name right, so I'm not.
Fries Football Fridays on our YouTube channel. I'm maybe more excited about these things than Matt. The plan is for Matt to do tape breakdowns for you all every Friday. And I just wanted to take that opportunity to tease it because you were complimenting somebody else.
So I'm not quite going to do it on this, but I would encourage you to check that out because it's a good resource to understand what's going on here. But ultimately, I think the Vikings did a good job adjusting, and they were running stuff that can attack this a little bit. But it just wasn't working because we were getting physically dominated up front. And that goes back to the offensive line being problematic. So the Browns did a good job of shutting down what was the wide zone run game, but then they also won up front and their players were better than our players. I'm not particularly concerned with Kubiak's play calling on that front. And really, I think it was fine all game. I just think we got out executed on the offensive side of the ball. If we go back to the defensive side of the ball, our run defense, I think, has been pretty good this year. I know, the numbers haven't looked great, and maybe this is a poison comparison because a lot of the times, you think back to last year where it was awful the whole time. But really, if you look at the numbers in this game, we're consistent. Like our defensive linemen are consistently holding the line of scrimmage, and we're contacting the players at the line of scrimmage. Maybe they fall forward for a few yards. Like a lot of the runs were 3 to 4 yards in this game. But really, it hasn't been an issue. The problem comes at the linebacker level more so, where Nick Vigil was not playing well. Eric Kendricks didn't play great in this game either. He was out of position a few times. Really, in coverage, I think Eric Kendricks got dinged by PFF. He had a really low grade because he got pulled up by play action a couple times, and they threw it right over. That was in the fourth quarter.
Well, you said last week that's how you beat Eric Kendricks.
Yeah, you can get him with misdirection sometimes. Usually he's like right on point, but sometimes if you pull a guard the wrong direction or something like against the flow of the run play, he's typically watching for those guards pulling, so he attacks that. So it can end up with him out of position.
The man loves to tackle. I'll let him slide.
Yeah, no, like he's fantastic most of the time. So 1 or 2 misses is not too big of a deal to me. But yeah, on that point, like, I thought the run defense was pretty good. And the Browns are an extremely good team. They're like the best running offense in the NFL. They have like the best offensive line in the NFL. So it's not easy to hold them to what we were holding them to. It's not easy to hold Nick Chubb to consistently 4-yard gains where he's being contacted at the line of scrimmage. He's typically too good at that, but we were muddying the picture for him. We were kind of eliminating the run lanes, and we generally did a pretty good job. Well, if you look at the plays where they got explosives, on that 33-yard run, there was a 13-yard run, I think, and there was a 9-yard run, which is like what raised their average up. That was like 3 of the 5 longest runs of the game for them were on draw plays. So they were like,
Chubb in particular he before this game he was averaging I think like 7 yards a carry or something.
Yeah,
something
that
crazy.
Surprise me.
Like
he's nuts.
Something nuts. Yeah, it's a great rushing attack, and even though they had those yards, like I said too, like it didn't seem like they were killing us on the ground.
No, it just, over the course of the game, especially when our offense wasn't doing anything, I think the box score numbers added up more than anything.
Right.
So
talk to me a little bit about Danielle Hunter. We're talking about the line and the stellar play that they had. What did you notice about him in particular? Because it seems like he is coming on.
I think we haven't really given Hunter a whole lot of airtime in this podcast, which is why I kind of put it in there because I wanted to talk about him a little bit. The first couple of weeks, maybe you would see like he wasn't quite at his athletic peak. Like, I mean, he's an athletic freak and he was still extremely athletic. But in this game, I think he really showed, especially on a couple of rollouts from Baker, that his athleticism is back. He got another sack in this game. I think he's at least 5 for the season, which is awesome to see through 4 games. He's got, but on the Baker rollout, he literally deterred Baker from making a wide open throw because he was able to turn, get in Baker's face, so he would potentially, knock the ball down and then also rally and make the tackle for a sack, actually 1 yard behind the line of scrimmage. Like, that was really impressive.
That was an awesome play.
There's another play where he recognizes the boot immediately, and just the turn radius and like the sheer acceleration, like you could see like fear in Baker's eyes. Well, maybe Baker wasn't afraid, but I felt afraid for Baker, and it ended up being a throwaway on that play, right? But
he would never admit it, but I imagine he might have been a little.
Yeah, just the acceleration's scary. So I'm really happy to see that he's back, and he's really kind of what I'm looking for, because he's, to maybe do a little bit of a breakdown here on, because he's been phenomenal, I think.
All right, so now let's talk a little bit about the other side of the ball. In particular, a lot of people like me, including Kirk Cousins, in our negative feelings about the game. You feel a little differently, don't you, Matt? And there's a couple of reasons for that, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, I wouldn't say Kirk Cousins was awesome this game, right? I would say that he was okay. And obviously he didn't do enough to win us the game.
Well, give us an example. There's a play that people are killing for.
So like there was a play that was going around on Twitter, right? And it was a play where KJ Osborne's wide open. I did a little breakdown today. You can find it on my Twitter account, where I go through kind of what's happening on the play. And ultimately, Kirk actually knows KJ is going to come open like immediately. And he looks off the safety. And by the time he goes through his drop, looks off the safety and comes to throw, and you can literally see him start to pull the ball back to throw. There's Ole in his lap, and Myles Garrett is beating Rashad Hill, and they're converging like right where Kirk's feet are. And he just doesn't have the physical space to make that throw. So he pulls it. He ends up that was the 9-yard sack by Tack McKinley. So ultimately, and this one, honestly, I kind of waffle a little bit on it, because I feel like there might be space to fall back and just heave one up there. But I really don't know. Like I'm not, that I've never been a quarterback, right? So I really don't know what you're physically capable of doing in that situation. I know he cannot have kept his feet the same place he was. He could not have stepped into the throw. So I don't know what the correct answer is in that situation, honestly.
You're totally right. And I think that, so I'm kind of the everyman of this podcast, I'm the guy who's, I don't have my doctorate, I got my bachelor's. I'm perfectly happy with it. I'm doing just fine with it. You know what I'm saying? But
yeah, I don't have my doctorate either, for what it's worth.
but I think what's hard about Kirk, using this play as an example, you're perfect. Your take is perfectly reasonable. It's like there's people at his feet. It's all happening so fast. All this stuff. I think that some of us are, and I include myself in this because I have a pretty long list at this point of quarterbacks I pine for in this league. We're all a little spoiled watching a very special group of young men who have just come out of college over the last 5 years, who are changing the game. I mean, they're literally rewriting how this game is played. And so we want something from Kirk that he's not able to give us, that he's not really built to give us. And it's maybe a little unfair to want it from him, because the guys that we're talking about, the guys that can do these things, they're genuinely unique. They're some of the most unique guys that have ever come into the league. And so it creates situations like this, firestorms around the guy. And it's like, and I count myself among them, but it's like, it's a little unfair.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a difficult conversation because, and it really goes back to the team building thing we mentioned earlier. Like, you have to assign your resources somewhere. And when you have Kirk, you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. And, you're paying him a lot of money, but he's not able to elevate the game like some of the top tier quarterbacks in the game are. So at that point, is he really worth paying him the money? And the answer is, are you a consistently competitive team? And we have not been. So
Matt, you're stealing all of my end of year topics. Okay, well, these are the things I was like, I'm not going to hit these because
you're the one who's bringing it up, right? You're the one who's bringing the questions to the table, Greg. So you got to take some of the blame here too. But no, if we want to jump to one of our shining stars of the season so far, really, and I want to end this game section on a positive note because I think Kirk Cousins trusts KJ Osborne just as much as he trusts Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson, and that's great to see. I think that awesome catch KJ had in the first half, 20 yards down the sideline, is the prime example of that. So that play specifically is an alert. So what an alert is on an offense is you have your play design, and you'll have, if you have one receiver to a side or something, you can have an option where if he's in man coverage and you like the matchup in man coverage, you can just throw the go ball to him. Kirk did that 3 or 4 times in this game. And that's why part of the reason I don't think Kirk was like conservative in this game or anything like that is he's taking these opportunities when he sees them. But it reminded me last year of the Justin Jefferson catch against the Titans. If people remember that, that was something Kirk identified as the point where he knew he could trust Justin Jefferson. And him doing this to KJ Osborne and Osborne coming down with the ball, I think is the exact same situation. I thought it was awesome when I saw, look, this play is I think Kirk and Janoko in Janoko's coach vid that he did call it a green apple look, but it's called an alert, whatever. Kirk makes the decision, I like my guy against your guy, and that guy was KJ Osborne. So I think that's great to see. KJ Osborne still playing great, I think.
Well, welcome to the big show, KJ. Good to have you here. All right. So we lost the game. We've dug into, we didn't even really hit everything. I mean, there's other reasons that we lost it, but we lost it. So we're 1-3. The first quarter, it's a bummer because the 16 game schedule always gave you a nice clean break for quarters of the season, which is a really good way to evaluate your team is like, how are we doing in this quarter? You know, the 17th game kind of screws that up, but I'm going to treat the first 16 games of the year as quarters still, because I think that 17th game is probably going to be garbage most of the time. Anyway, the first quarter of the year is done. We're 1-3. Like we said at the top of the show, we kind of thought this might be an option, and it kind of feels way shittier than we thought it would. What would you say, and other than trying to avoid using a blanket term like the offensive line, what would you say is this team's Achilles heel? I have some ideas of what I would say. What would you say?
Yeah, I think, and I thought about this for a little bit. For me, it's the lack of, I'm having a hard time of coming up with the words, but it's the lack of a spark or like the impact moments, I think are the issue. If you look at one of the things, I think our defense has played pretty well and we've schemed pretty well. We only have 2 turnovers on defense. And when the moment is big, we have not risen to the occasion.
I didn't even realize that.
In general. Now, on the flip side of that, we've only turned the ball over twice on offense. We have one of the lowest turnover rates on offense, and we have one of the lowest turnover rates on defense, right? So there haven't been a whole lot of those impact moments in our game. But again, the impact moments or the rising to the occasion, I guess might be a better way to say it. Game 1, we have the opportunity to go down, win the game. Dalvin Cook fumbles the ball. We end up losing the game. Game 2, we miss the 37-yard field goal. And there's a culmination of plays that lead up to that, but there hasn't been a big impact that has turned the tide of the game in the team's favor. And I think that has been the failing of the team. Now, I don't know.
And you could also make an argument that for some teams that is a skill. It's something that you just do. You seal the deal. And we've watched Vikings teams in the past were very capable of it. One of the greatest Vikings teams ever, helmed by Case Keenum, was absolute literal magic. They were miraculous at sealing the deal.
Yep.
You know, we literally have
until the last game. Yeah.
We're not going to discuss the last game, but yeah. No, I totally agree with that, Matt. And I would say for me, you could pick a number of things, but I think the thing that scares me the most at this point in the year it seems a little crazy to say, especially after the Cardinals game. I don't think we've really been tested through the air yet. I don't think that we've faced a team that has like just come out and bombed it on us. And I don't think that we have the horses to run with certain team. There's also a particular team in the NFC North that I'm not going to mention that we haven't faced an attack that's like that. And I worry about this team's ability, especially in, some future playoff environment. And so let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Playoffs.
So I think that I do think the Cardinals are actually a good test. I will disagree with you a little bit there and we kind of failed that test. But the reason we failed that test was Kyler's ability to extend plays. I thought we were very good prior to Kyler extending plays in the Cardinals game, and that's a little bit problematic. I do agree with you that in particular the cornerback 2 spot is a problem. Rashad Breeland has been not good this year, and I think he's been okay at times, but I mean he's had major mistakes, and when you have major mistakes, like that's not acceptable for a corner to be out there. Cameron Dantzler, I mean, he graded out really well in this past game, and he didn't allow a lot,
he played pretty well.
But those open Odell plays. You know who he was open against? And Baker just missed him. It was Cameron Dantzler, right? So that is a little bit of a concern for me too.
I'm concerned about it, Matt, because and I tried to tease it. I teased it a little bit. Let's talk about the playoffs. Okay, like that's when all of your Achilles heels, the things that you're not good at, become apparent because
you're going to get exposed.
You have a whole season of tape exposing you. So do we think at this point, and we said before the year, we were all a little on the fence, is this a playoff team to you at this point? Because I would say amongst the 1-3 teams in the league right now, personally, I think we're better than all of them. So I'll preface my opinion with that.
I would agree with that statement. I actually brought up the list of 1-3 teams, and I think we're the best of those teams. Yep. The other teams are the Giants, Patriots, Steelers, Eagles, Colts, Dolphins, Jets, Falcons, Texans.
Yeah, and we're better than all those guys.
The number one thing, honestly, is kind of Kirk Cousins, because all of those other teams' quarterbacks are not great. But I think all of the other teams have glaring flaws, where the Vikings, I think, are a pretty good team, or maybe average team.
A star running back. We have star receivers. We have a defense that's sort of taking shape. Yep. Those other teams, most of them have enormous gaping holes in their roster, huge issues that are not easily fixed. And
the reason we've lost 3 games have been an accumulation of small things adding up, more so than, a giant mismatch against any of the opponents that we've had. The problem is that even if we are capable of making the playoffs, which the rest of our schedule is not simple necessarily, it's like previous years, we're not going to be able to sustain that level of play for multiple games, right? We might pull out a surprise win against the Saints and then get absolutely clobbered by the 49ers the next week. So that's really the concern. In terms of teams in the rest of the NFC, I think the Cardinals are better than us. I think the Rams are better than us. I think the Bucs are better than us. I think the Packers are better than us.
Answer the question. Is this what you've seen?
I don't
right
think they're
now,
going to make the playoffs at this point. It's hard. It's hard after the 1-3 hole. I mean,
I was hoping you'd say something else.
of the 1-3 teams, they have the best shot, and I'm sure at least one of the 1-3 teams will make it. But I don't.
We have a real chance to miss the playoffs, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's crazy. I can't believe we're talking about that.
Well, we missed. I don't think it's that crazy. Like, we missed them last year.
I really thought. I'll be honest with you. I really thought we had enough talent on offense to overcome our defensive issues, and I feel like we said that as much on this show. I don't think we have the horses this year. And we're healthy right now. I don't know.
I think we have the horses to do it. But we need things to break our way the rest of the season. And so far things have specifically not broken our way. Yeah. And we kind of talked about that a little bit, but that's a problem, right? When things aren't breaking your way. Yeah. So if they start to break our way, maybe we come back and we'll be competitive for the playoffs, is what I will say. We'll be in the hunt, in the hunt pictures in the last couple of weeks of the season. But ultimately, I think it's going to be hard to make it.
You know what's a great way to get yourself back on track? Play the Detroit Lions, which is what we're going to do next week.
Hey,
and honestly, I don't even want to spend a whole lot of time talking about these guys. What is there to talk about?
So I think what we can talk about is the Bears, who were in a funk last week.
Let's keep this snappy. You know what I'm saying?
Who came off of a loss against the Browns, where their offense was absolutely abysmal. And now Justin Fields is like the second coming in Chicago, which Justin Fields looked great. He made some absolutely awesome throws. I'm happy for him.
I don't want to talk about Justin Fields.
But the Lions, fortunately for us, are not a good team, and they're not a good roster. So
they're horrible. They're horrible. And they've played feisty against the Ravens, but if you watch that game at all, the Ravens weren't exactly helping themselves.
Hollywood Brown dropped like 4 touchdowns.
Exactly. And they play really good for the first half of all these games, and then they blow it because they are talentless. They're bereft of talents. They have a rah-rah sis boom bah coach, which never works. It never fucking works. Why do these teams hire these guys? It never works. There has never been a rah-rah sis boom bah coach that has won a Super Bowl. Never. Name me one fucking guy who's been rah-rah, sis boom bah. The Mike Tysons of the world cannot win in this league. Why do these teams hire these guys? I got nothing against Dan Campbell. I'm sure he's a great positions coach. I'm sure he's an awesome person. I don't know anything about the guy. But it's just like, what are we talking? We don't need to talk about the Lions. They're starting Jared Goff at quarterback, man. Like, come on. That guy went from having all the options in the world to throwing jump balls to Quintez Cephas in Detroit. There's nothing to talk about with this team. Like, all right. I just had to get that out.
That was awesome. That was amazing.
Team.
I was sitting here in awe of
that. I feel bad. I feel bad for Detroit Lions fans. I like those fans because year after year they have to watch this dog shit football and they keep coming back. That stadium is full all the time. And I'm just like, what are y'all doing there? Like, go outside. What the fuck? It's crazy.
So on the Lions, I don't think Dan Campbell's done a terrible job so far. I actually think he's done a pretty good job. That team, that roster was absolutely bereft of talent after the Matt Patricia era. What they tried to do with Matt Patricia is bring Patricia's guys in, the Belichick
3 years
guys
of rebuilding,
in, nothing. Belichick guys
nothing
in,
to show for it.
Right? And have them in the system and try to make that work. And it didn't work because Matt Patricia was a terrible coach. So that is hard to come back from because the Patriots use a lot of guys who aren't your prototypical, NFL players. They use some tweeners and they use some guys who do some different things. So for me, the scariest part of the Lions at the moment, due to their talent mismanagement in the previous years, would have been the defensive line. Romeo Okwara, who's actually a really good defensive end.
Never heard of him.
Well, unfortunately for him, I believe he tore his Achilles. So he's going to be out for the rest of the season.
He buried the lead, man. Sorry.
Well, I was going to say, I was scared of their defensive line. And now Romeo Okwara,
totally ripping on this poor guy,
is out for the season, unfortunately. So I don't think they're really going to be able to do much up front against us, and we'll be able to run on them. Dalvin, who, is still hurt, I think will have a much better game. I honestly, outside of the plays where he went out due to injury, I don't think his injury really limited him. He still looked pretty snappy in terms of cuts and stuff. It was just our offensive line was getting destroyed again. And that's not going to happen against the Lions. I don't think that they have the talent up front to be able to do that against us. I also don't think they have the talent up front to deal with our offensive line to get the pass protection they need. Penei Sewell, who I liked a lot, has been up and down. I think he leads all offensive linemen in pressures allowed. So he's kind of struggled a little bit. I think we'll be able to dominate up front. Their wide receivers, I don't even think are going to be able to take advantage of our corner too, because Their wide receiver group is not good. DeAndre Swift is fun and talented, but he's one guy. So TJ Hockenson is fun and talented.
Like 4 more people on that roster that I can even possibly name. I'm not worried about the Detroit Lions. I think we're going to beat them by 21 points. You heard it right here, folks. 21-point win over the Detroit Lions. Matt, do you have any final? We covered a lot in this episode. I'm actually pretty proud of us considering we're down a member this evening. Is there anything that's nagging in the back of your mind that I really wanted to mention this one thing about the game? Or
the one thing I did want to mention is the Vikings are absolutely horrible, and I think this isn't really like a sustainable thing, but they were absolutely horrible at the end of the second quarter. Like within 2 minutes left, we didn't allow any points against the Seahawks, but in the other 3 games we allowed 35 points. Like we've allowed our opponents to score twice with less than 2 minutes remaining in the second quarter in 3 of our games. It's ridiculous. Like, I don't know how we keep allowing it. It's crazy.
Not being good in the second quarter can sink an entire season. Just ask the Minnesota Timberwolves of the last 3 years.
I mean, we went down, we were up 7-0, and then all of a sudden we're down 11-0, and Cleveland gets the ball to start the second half in the last game.
Not good.
It's hard to play like that.
All right. It's time, Matt. It's time for 15 seconds of fantasy, which we're going to amend this evening to 10 seconds of fantasy. Right. Even less fantasy for our listeners.
The intro is still like 45 seconds, though.
That's actually blowing up my spot, man. You're totally blowing up my spot. What do you want me to do? 15 seconds of fantasy. Go. You have 5 seconds.
I'm 3-1, leading the league in points for. Go me. I play Nick this week. He's going down. I just got
win number 2. You are still sleeping on me. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this has been Kindred Coles. This has been Kindred Skulls. That is the new name of our podcast. You can find us, if you're already following us on Twitter, you don't have to do anything. The name changed already. You may not have even noticed. We are Kindred Skulls on Twitter. We're available on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us now on YouTube by searching for Kindred Skulls. Just in case you haven't heard it enough, it's Kindred Skulls. That's our name. And for the record,
you'll love the sound.
We created both names that we have used on this show. We have the DMs and the time codes to fucking prove it. So eat me. All right. You can... I had to get one out. Matt. All right, Matt, where can people find you on Twitter?
At Fries Football.
Excellent. You can find me at You've Been Gregg on Instagram. That's where I do most of my online stuff. You can find Nick Olson, who is usually with us, at Nick Olson NFL. It's been a lovely time, Matt, you and me. This is how it started, We did a live stream during the draft this year, and that was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. 4 hours of content that was not recorded. So
absolute marathon.
That was a marathon. That was a total marathon, which we'd like to do again. And we've teased this a few times. We really do want to do a Sunday live stream. It's a massive commitment, and we got to get it right. We got to be high energy for you and all that. So we just haven't had the weekend that will work yet, but it will happen. And I have a feeling once it happens once, it'll happen again and again. So thank you for being with us here at Kindred Skulls. Matt, any last words?
No, I think you covered everything. That was great.
We're out!
First round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. Oh, another first round corner wouldn't do us any harm. And we'll all cheer on behind. And we'll score the